Welcome to another episode of Unlocked. Today, Douglas Ferguson is going to impart some wisdom on us about how facilitation can help us level up our leadership and level up who we are just as people. And in particular, we talk a lot about meetings in this because I think that applies to all of us. We are all in meetings, and whether that's corporate meetings, whether that's church meetings, whether that's school meetings, whether that's community, meetings, like we're always in meetings. And we have had experience with horrible meetings, and we've had experience with fantastic meetings. And facilitation is the foundation of what is going to create a good meeting versus a poor meeting in Douglas's eyes. And we get a good argument for that in this interview. So Douglas is an entrepreneur, an educator, a human-centered technologist. He's the founder of Voltage Control. They help leaders through certifications, workshops, and organizational coaching, focus on facilitation mastery. So I love this because I facilitate a lot of discussions and I take a lot of what he says to heart here. He's worked with Nike, US SOCOM, Google, the Air Force, Gap, Tesla. He's worked with Adobe, Dropbox, Fidelity, Liberty Mutual, Humana. Is there any giant company I did not mention? Douglas has been around. He knows his stuff, and you are going to get some good insights in this interview. I'm excited to have Douglas on the call. We've been waiting for this for a long time. So here we go. Boom, Douglas. We are here together to do this thing right now.
We are. I've been looking forward to this ever since we started chatting at South by Southwest, and this idea of getting together on your podcast was born. So yeah, looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, well, feeling a little insecure as I'm facilitating a workshop at South by, understanding that a facilitation mastermind is in the audience. Like now I'm just going, oh my gosh, what did I say? What did I do? Did I do this right? Did I do that? So I'm like thinking about those things and trying to facilitate this thing. But I mean, the good thing is we get tons of practice because we're facilitating all the time, right?
That's right. Facilitation shows up in everything we do. And in fact, I think that was a real epiphany for me, as I was a CTO for a number of years, but I was really drawn to how do I help make my teams as effective as possible. So whether it was extreme programming way back in the day for those old graybeards like me, all the way to design sprints was one of the more modern approaches I was using prior to making the jumps fully into facilitation when I started Voltage Control. And I think it shows up in every meeting we have. And in fact, in my book, Magical Meetings, we say there's no such thing as bad meetings, just bad facilitators.
Okay. So every time I have a bad meeting, I just need to look who the poor facilitator is.
That's
and
right.
Understand what's going on, right?
That's right. And so oftentimes folks haven't acknowledged or stepped into that role because it's an identity people don't necessarily have. They don't think of themselves, oh, I'm a scrum master, or I'm the VP of design, or whatever your title might be. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have facilitator in that title. And so we don't necessarily think that that's a skill we need to sharpen or hone, but it's super critical because we spend so much time in meetings and with our teammates collaborating and trying to find new solutions, often trying to innovate together and understand each other to integrate our thinking.
Okay. So I'm a facilitator all the time. Okay. And so I'm taking on that identity, not just in speaking and workshops and online group coaching sessions, but with meetings with people, facilitating discussions with my family, those types of things. When I am facilitating, I am leading.
Yes.
Where's the connection there for you? If you talk about those things being synonymous in some way, shape, or form, what's the connection?
I think it's a modern form of leadership. Old styles of leadership are about command and control. I'm going to tell you what to do. The modern forms of leadership are about nurturing, extracting, inspiring, motivating. I once heard this leader tell me, I'm not a know-it-all, I'm a learn-it-all. So leaders that have this curious mindset that they're going to grow and learn with their team. What does my intern have to tell me and teach me about the way the world works, right? And so if you take that leadership lens, you're probably already in a facilitative mindset. And so layering in some facilitation school tools and techniques and principles and foundations can be really powerful complement to that. And then leaders that aren't, but are curious about this stuff, can be really powerful first step.
What's one of the things that you look for that in a facilitator, and or maybe not look for, but watch out for because it happens all the time, and you're like, that's a facilitation no. That's facilitation no. That's facilitation, and it's one of those common things that we can all look at and go, oh yeah, okay, that's good.
Yeah, there's quite a bit. I think that probably the most pervasive one is, especially when we think about everyday meetings, is people will say things like these common beliefs around what makes a good meeting. So they'll say, I need to have an agenda, no attenda, or action items and these things. And they seem to make sense, right? But at the end of the day, they don't embrace this idea that meetings can be learning experiences. We can craft an experience or a journey with our attendees if we just show up with an agenda that's a list of topics, which is how most people are defining agendas when they're thinking about, I got to have an agenda. And instead, let's think about that roadmap. How do we want to open this experience? How do we want to close it? What are the waypoints along the way that we need to assess that we're actually on target? What are we even trying to accomplish together? So often those things aren't clear, and you can elevate the experience for everyone if we just literally think about them as experiences and just acknowledge the fact that that's what it is.
It's an experience. So I'm not just holding a meeting. I'm holding an experience, people.
That's right.
We're gonna come out this different than when we came into it.
That's right. And especially if you're anything that you're trying to do, we talk about meetings being informative or decisive or explorative. And there's some other types as well, but those three specifically, we're going to come out transformed. If we're exploring stuff, we just explored something. So we have this new understanding of things. If we're going to do a decisive meeting, then we're going to come out with decisions made. And that's another thing that people get wrong when they're facilitating. And it's why a lot of people feel like that disgruntled or dissatisfied with a meeting is because we came in with different expectations. Have you ever been in a meeting where you thought a decision was going to be made and you came out without a decision being made? Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. It happens.
Yeah. And so what if the person holding that meeting never intended to have a decision made? And that whole feeling of being disappointed was just totally unnecessary and could have been avoided if the leader had said, we're just coming together to generate some ideas today. We're going to make a decision later, and this is how we're going to make the decision. So clarifying all that is super powerful. And that comes back to one of my favorite quotes from Brene Brown. Clarity is kindness.
I love that.
So good.
I love that. I love that. It is. When we aren't clear, a lot of things happen. A lot of feelings happen, and they're unnecessary at times.
Absolutely. And I think another thing, I just want to piggyback on that because so often it's easy to, as a leader, to get defensive because of the way people are behaving, or to get concerned about this dysfunctional behavior. And it's important to step back and go and think that my lack of clarity caused this dysfunction, because sometimes it's not very apparent that that's the cause. And if it is, wow, like owning that and having some grace for yourself and being okay, being vulnerable in front of everyone, saying, I think I need to own this, that I could have been more clear about this, and it would have helped us all do better work. And that can be really powerful, just modeling that clarity, as well as being willing to step back and say, you know what, this is kind of my fault, even though maybe people shouldn't have behaved the way they behaved, But if we really come back to the very beginnings, how we could have avoided it, just owning it and saying, hey, like I could have been more clear here.
We call that being a secure, confident, and humble
Mm,
leader.
yes.
So being secure in who you are, confident, not arrogant, but that humble piece is what defines that. I think is the am I humble enough to know that I'm not a know-it-all, that I'm a learn-it-all. Like I love
Mm.
that pivot that you brought up earlier. That's really cool. What makes a good facilitator?
I think a great facilitator is curious and asks lots of questions, and they have a strong sense of um, connection and empathy toward the group. So they're really attending to the humans. And I think the other thing that is a hallmark of a great facilitator is being able to synthesize on the fly. So they're connecting and linking. I'm sure you've heard the term, we're all in a violent agreement here. Well, if a room is in violent agreement, the facilitator's job should be to notice that, to label it, to call it out, and to make us all aware of it. But sometimes the facilitator is often not really engaging in the conversation or not bringing content per se, but just helping the group kind of almost self-actualize. If the self-awareness of the group is not there, they're helping turn that lens toward themselves and go, oh, this is what's happening. Okay, we can now we can navigate a little bit better.
What got you into this? Like, what all
Yeah.
of a sudden were you like, you know, this whole CTO thing? I don't know. I think I'm going to go into facilitation. What was
Yeah,
that?
it's kind of a funny journey because I was, like I said, really big fan of how do we make the most out of our people? Like, how do we really set up these conditions so that people can thrive and do their best work? What are sustainable practices? So I was always looking at these tools and methods, and that covered the gamut from I mentioned extreme programming earlier to agile and lean and design thinking types of principles, liberating structures, all these different methodologies out in the world. I was just super curious about them. And then fast forward to my last startup in the tech world was an art marketplace, and we were using design sprints. And uh, Google Ventures ended up investing in my company. Got to be pretty good pals with Jake. We were kind of pen pals because I was a big fan of the process, and I was getting feedback on things we were trying. But then once the investment happened, I got to know him personally, and it was really fascinating watching him work and talking about being on the road and doing this stuff for companies. And as I started to exit that startup, I was thinking a lot about, what would it be like to really lean into the pieces of the work that I really enjoyed the most. And I'm sure you can relate to this too, as a designer, someone who is really hands-on in the actual doing and tactical aspects of design, and then moving in and noticing that, wow, as a leader of creative people, this has been an interesting journey. How can I now talk about that journey and help people share in some of these insights and what that I've noticed about that experience? Because I was kind of learning the school of hard knocks or whatever, right? And so kind of a similar situation where I was thinking about, wow, these are the pieces I really love. These are the things that I kind of just learned through osmosis a bit and research. How can I take this to the world? Because it seems like a bigger problem. I think also the other thing that exacerbated it is that my CEO kind of weaponized meetings. Who was invited, who was left out, and culturally there were just some things that did not invite a nurturing, empathetic, taking care of the humans kind of space. And so I think I was just kind of hell bent on how can I go take a more human centered approach to the workplace, and that's how Voltage Control was born. And now we're, certifying facilitators 6 years later.
That's awesome. So yeah, I guess the journey is a little bit the same. It was that whole thing of me not really knowing what I didn't know until I realized that I didn't know it, and going, I don't need that leadership stuff. I help people communicate every day. Like that's my job, and then one day just having you know, seeing the light, just seeing the light and going, wow, there's some stuff I need to learn. And in fact, I think everybody else needs to learn this too, because it's going to help us as a creative agency be better at our job if we can help them be better communicators overall. And then that just kind of took over. So I get it. I guess is now you've landed where you've landed because of your journey, and so I'm there with you. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. It's like following the little scent trails of like, what's interesting here and what can work here and how can I have impact? I think that really for me underscores my kind of choose your own adventure story. It's like, where are the pockets of interest, but also how does that overlap with impact? Like, where am I noticing these levers where when I do work, I can see a bigger impact in the world? And
Okay,
specifically, yeah.
let's stop there for a second and talk about impact, because I'm going to go. People have meetings every day, multiple meetings, sometimes all day meetings that just go on all the time. And there's facilitation, there's people leading those meetings most of the time, people in meetings all the time. So why, like, yeah, they could probably be a little better. Like, I'll sit there and say, sure, like my meetings could be a little bit better, but they're fine. Like, people are just coming to them, they're doing their job. But you're talking about you've been able to see an impact in the ones that you've been able to be involved with, or the things that you've been able to implement. What kind of impact? Take me on
Yeah.
a journey from, the Cinderella story journey of impact here.
Yeah. I think the probably the number one there's 10 meeting mantras in the Magical Meetings book, and when we were helping people understand how to lever their meetings, those 10 mantras are kind of at the epicenter of a lot of stuff. And of course there are some tools for people to examine their meetings and just take a step back and look at them, but ultimately it's purpose, and then also this idea of prototyping and doing work in the meeting. And I'm sure anyone in the design world understands the idea of prototyping. Design's thinking, rapid prototyping is such a big piece of kind of what we do. But how do we bring that mindset into everyday work tasks? For instance, if we're looking at doing some market research and we want to put together an interview plan, I think a lot of times when people come together to do a project like that, they sit down and they start talking and they start kind of bringing ideas to the table. Maybe if we were in person, there would be a whiteboard that someone's scribbling at. But so that's actually good when we're kind of at a whiteboard visually creating things. I think now with digital whiteboards and other visualization tools, we can create more prototypes more often. And so how do we encourage people to bring to life the conversations? Because if it's just a conversation, it's just words in the room, they can kind of float away. And so that has a huge impact on teams when they shift from just having conversations to actually collaborating, actually creating prototypes together. And I just encourage people to really have a broad definition of prototype, because it's not just about an early a representative version of a thing. Like a lot of times people think of prototypes as a proof of concept, but prototypes can be anything that answers a question, right? And if we just bring that mindset into every product that we're working on, how can we start to come together and build something? Because then we don't have to have these action items from our meetings. We come out of the meeting with an artifact, and it's very clear, like, oh, you're going to work on this part of it, I'm going to work on this part, and then we'll come back. that allows for a lot more asynchronous. And once you get to a culture where you're doing more and more asynchronous work, then that has a huge impact, because now you don't have all that time scheduling, the cost of people being in a room or in a Zoom synchronously, very, very expensive. I mean, you can do the math on that very easily, right? And what's the opportunity cost of people being in these meetings where they maybe aren't being as productive as they could be? So really, it's projects getting done faster with less errors, because we're realizing some of these issues sooner. Maybe even abandoning projects earlier because we didn't spend months working on something and then ultimately realize that it was a bad idea. I think those types of things we can draw very specific numbers to, right? From an impact standpoint. And I think finally, the thing that's a little harder to quantify is it's just the sentiment and the impact it has on people's moods, and that shows up in employee retention as well as innovation, right? Like if people are enjoying their jobs more, they're going to be more likely to come with creative ideas versus feeling like they're just in a hamster wheel of like, oh, just another meeting or just this or that. So I think it shows up in both these quantitative and qualitative ways.
Okay. So we've got poor meeting. Like, what's the biggest? Let me ask you this before I go into that point. What's people's biggest complaint about meetings?
Mm.
What do you think?
Certainly, yeah. Well, we hear that there's too many of them. We also hear that they are disorganized or unstructured, like they are pointless, right? We're just kind of like nothing's happening. It's like the revolving door of meetings, because the meeting about the meeting about the meeting kind of thing. I think those are probably the top three that we hear most often.
Okay. So we have that. And you believe good facilitation, being a facilitative leader, can shift that mindset
Yes,
from.
absolutely.
Does it mean we're going to have less meetings?
That is part of it, right? We will certainly, if we're moving into creating prototypes and being mindful of the meetings we're having and thinking about them as experiences and what's the real purpose of the meeting, then there will be some meetings that we'll realize have outlived their purpose, or they never had a purpose to begin with, and so we'll get rid of them. Also, like I was saying about prototypes, allow us to get better at async work, and if we're doing more async work, then we're doing work outside the meetings. Because I don't know how many people tell me that I've had so many meetings I don't have time to get work done. It's like, okay, well, do the work in the meeting, or let's prioritize our initiatives so that we can just set some stuff aside so we can get the work done. It's an interesting thing about priority, the word. It was only in the 50s when we gained a plural version of priority. So what have we done to ourselves, right? What does it mean to have multiple priorities?
That's interesting.
Just the other day, I heard someone say we have 5 North Star metrics, and I was like, I think the whole point of a North
How many
Star is
North?
there's only one of them.
There's, yeah, take that analogy. There's 5 North Stars. You're not going in any one direction.
Where is
Yeah,
North?
and where is North? Unless they're all behind each other and some weird. I'm sure, whatever. We're not going to get into astrology on this thing, or astronomy. But I think that's a good point, is to think about. Okay, so because I've had friends, my corporate friends, that were like, I had meetings all day and they come home and they check email for 2 or 3 hours at night because they don't have time to get to their emails during the day because they're in meetings all day. And the power of facilitating these conversations in ways that are productive can mean that we are more intentional about which meetings we schedule and when, so that we can make sure that they're powerful. So if I want to become a powerful facilitator right now, okay, what are things I need to do? What is something I can do right now to create less meetings, more impactful meetings, more productive meetings, meetings that people actually enjoy coming to because there's a sense of collaboration and facilitation happening there? Like, what can I do?
Yeah, there's lots of ways to start. For one thing, we have a blog at voltagecontrol.com, as well as free resources that you can download. So that's a great place to start to get free access. We also do a free event called Facilitation Lab, where we have a community of facilitators that are supporting each other and growing. And and then for those that are wanting to really dive in, we have a facilitation certification program that's 12 weeks, a real deep dive into how to do these things. And so I encourage folks. There's so many methods and ways of approaching this stuff. Just really encourage you to look around. And we even on our blog we're highlighting as much as we can about other work that's out there in the world, because we're a real big believer that this is a new way of thinking about leadership. It is a really important skill for the future, and so we're spreading as much as we can about all the different methodologies that are out there. And so, if our stuff isn't a great fit, there's probably other things out there too, and we're celebrating and highlighting all of it. So definitely check out the site and all the things we're sharing and talking about, because there's just so much to learn and know about. And the cool thing is there's an evolving conversation. So tapping in and just kind of just putting it on your radar so that you kind of can get some tips and things along the way, because I think just being mindful of it is the first step. Just realizing that, hey, this is a skill to improve on. This is something that can be nuanced. And I think that awareness is super, super critical, because I think once you start thinking about it, oh, maybe I should be a little more intentional about who I invite to this meeting. Maybe I should be a little bit more intentional about the purpose and explaining our intention together, and being mindful about how people are in the room and attentive to the emotions and things that are surfacing up. That can go a long way, just noticing those things. And some people find that they've built skills and learned things along the way throughout their career that they can just immediately take and put into use. And I know, Scott, in your coaching and the work you're doing with Giant, there's lots of techniques that are kind of facilitative in nature, like the 70-30 is a great example, right? And so I think that just being aware and attuned to it, you can start to think about, well, what tools and things do I already have in my toolkit that I can just start pulling out and using more. I think maybe that's the first step, is just being aware of it and just saying, what little things can I do? And then just being on the lookout, because then you'll start making connections and throughout your daily life and work and family, etc.
Okay. Say I'm not aware of it. Say I just do my meetings and we just go to our meetings and do our thing. How do I know that I need this?
Yeah.
What's a clue? What's a thing that I can go, oh, I think I do need that. Like, who are you looking for? What kind of person?
Oh, wow. Yeah. The thing is well, to get really to brass tacks, how do I know I need that? I think the thing I'll always tell people is start having attendees rate your meetings, and you'll quickly realize how much you need to improve meetings. It's like having net promoter score of your meetings, really powerful. Um, but when I think about people that benefit the most from this kind of work, it's really what we borrow from the term, from the organizational development term, boundary spanners. So these are people that are functioning, at all different levels in an organization. They're moving horizontally across the organization, vertically. So they might work with interns and the CEO. They might work with, the IT department and the HR department. So these individuals tend to move all around the org, and they're not stuck in silos. So oftentimes, people like chiefs of staff is one that's like where it's really critical that they are really good at this stuff, because they're having to navigate lots of different teams and groups. Scrum masters have to do this stuff because they're working with design and product and engineering. Often engineering leaders, design leaders, product managers, program managers, these folks have to work with a diverse set of individuals that span lots of different parts of the organization. And you think about UX, research, designers, those people are constantly talking to all different kinds of individuals, whether it's different kinds of clients, or even if you're doing any kind of employee experience or the work you're doing is benefiting folks inside the company, then you're probably talking to a lot of folks around the company doing lots of different things. And so these skills really matter because you can kind of fake it a lot more when you're working with like-minded people. Like if you're just an engineering manager and you just manage a small team of engineers that you've handpicked and they're a lot like you, it's it's a lot easier to facilitate that group because there's a lot of nodding. In fact, one of my favorite meeting stories was the CEO of GM years and years and years ago. I think it was Sloan, and he was saying that there was a meeting where they were discussing some strategy, and he looked at the executive team and said, "Gentlemen," and at that time it was all men, of course, but he was like, "Gentlemen, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, and we're going to return at a later date once we've developed some points of disagreement." And so, and I think that's really what facilitation is about. Like noticing that, wait a second, like we're all saying the same stuff. Let's back up, hit the pause button, and let's come back together when we've all developed some new thoughts. And if we're not attuned to that and thinking about it, it's really going to prevent us from finding truly innovative. We'll just be stuck in the novel solutions or the obvious basic solutions. And if we want breakthrough ideas and solutions, we really got to be nurturing some deeper collaboration.
Because that is where the mundane, boring, over and over again, repetitive meeting mindset comes in. No impact, moving out of this, not really evolved in any way, shape, or form, is because we are all agreeing and just saying and nodding our heads and being passive. Now that's partly engagement, but it's partly like, why are we here? What are we doing in this place in the first place? So I think that's a really good insight. Are we walking in this thing and out of this thing the same way we were when we came in? We need to rethink what we're doing here as far as facilitation, facilitating these meetings. So tell me about your book. Can people get a hold of that somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. And really quick, you mentioned engagement, and this is a hot topic that everyone talks about, engagement. And this is the number one question I hear from people. It's like, how do I get more engagement, especially in the virtual world, right? Because there's so many other distractions. People don't have their cameras on. Should we mandate cameras on? And I'm like, you can't regulate or rulify people into more engagement. If so, it's a facade, right? You want to deeply motivate people and get them connected at a more fundamental level. And so that's where these prototypes and getting people hands-on and doing things, that's where connecting more clearly to a purpose and making sure people understand why they're there. You want people like really excited to contribute and to author and co-create something that will create engagement. But you can't paint engagement on top. It's like putting lipstick on a pig, right? You can't just throw it. You can't just sprinkle some engagement on stuff. That has to come from deep within, and we have to really nurture it. It's sort of like
it's so good. Yeah, it's like engagement dust. It's like,
yes,
hey, you're going to sprinkle you with some engagement dust so we can get you better engaged.
It makes me think of a metaphor I really like to use is a garden, and you wouldn't imagine like someone going, well, how do I make that plant grow? Well, the plant grows on its own. We had to set the conditions for the plant to grow. So we had to water it. We had to fertilize the soil. We can't over fertilize it, right? And so I think facilitation is very similar in the sense that how do we set those conditions for the outcomes that we want to emerge and allow them to emerge. And so engagement's very similar kind of thing. People will engage. We just can't control that. and we can't just like force it to happen. So the book, yes, the book is available on Amazon, and my publisher's got in a few stores here and there. And but I think by and large, most people are buying books on Amazon, so it's there for folks. And anyone in Italy, it's about to be translated to Italian, so that's pretty exciting.
How did that happen? How do you choose like which language it's going to go into?
Yeah, that's it's it wasn't a strategic choice. It was more serendipity. There's a group in Italy that focuses on facilitation, and they've got a facilitation community, and they're translating books that are helpful or just relevant for their facilitation community. And so they're basically translating for that community, and then also promoting it more broadly. So the way they look at it, they've got a built-in set of buyers because they're kind of basically translating it for them and their learning. And so when these folks reached out, I was like, well, this seems like a no-brainer. It's like, a tailor fit for the audience. And so yeah, not super strategic, but I don't look a gift horse in the mouth, as my mom used to say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to leave it with that one, because that right there, that's the gold. That's the gold from this whole interview. That last
Nice.
little quote. Thanks, Douglas's mom. Appreciate you. Douglas, has been good. Thanks for shedding some light on us, and people can get in touch with you at Voltage Control. Anywhere else you hang out?
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a ton, and I've been really enjoying sharing some thoughtful prompts, and the LinkedIn community's been responding. So we've been talking a lot about, what does it mean to facilitate, and what's your facilitation story? And I don't know, lots of fun conversations happening there. So if you connect with me on there, then you'll see all that dialogue happening.
Cool. Awesome. Well, man, I'm sure this will not be the last time we interact. So look forward to hanging out with you more. You've got some good stuff, and I will try not to be self-conscious every time I'm around you.
Absolutely not. Let's keep it conversation going. And you did a fantastic job in South by Southwest, and so I'll just kudos you. And for those listening, one thing that you modeled, and this is great for them to hear too, is that as people were showing up before the event even started, you were talking to folks and asking them why they came and engaging. And I think that is super important. And how many meetings are we in where we're just like, people, maybe some people arrived earlier, we're waiting for some of the laggards, and we're all just kind of sitting there. Like, how do we, if you want to engage people, if you want people to be engaged, engage them.
Engagement tip to leave it. Thank you. That's awesome. Very, very cool. Yeah, I'm trying to be more intentional about that. It's something I learned from a mentor of mine a while ago, and it's served me well. So thanks for bringing that up and emphasizing and noticing. I appreciate that. So
absolutely. Well, it's been great. I really appreciated the chat today. Thanks for having me.
I'm not a know-it-all. I'm a learn-it-all. Are you walking into your facilitation opportunity, whatever that may be, secure, confident, and humble? Are you walking in thinking you have all the stuff, all the knowledge, all the things that are going to make everybody just bow down to you and just say, that was amazing? Or are you walking in with collaborative ideas in mind, looking to, set a pace for where we're going to go and then where we're going to end up at the end? Are we going to walk out of that meeting different than we walked into that meeting? Something for you to think about, something for you to ponder. And if you are having issues with meetings, with people being excited or engaged in those meetings, maybe you do need to rate your meetings. Maybe you do need to send out an NPS score, some kind of survey about, hey, how likely are you to recommend this meeting to a friend? So something like that, something to get some idea of where you can improve and how people are feeling about those. Curiosity, asking questions, dictating conversation, being adaptable, moving with the way the crowd is moving is something that I've tried to learn as a speaker and a facilitator, and something that I think will serve you well in your meetings as well. I think that as we learn to do these things, we will increase the level of engagement with our people without the engagement dust that we talked about earlier, but being able to really get the best out of people. And that's what we're trying to do. I appreciate you being on this episode of Unlocked. And if you want to find out more about me, you can go to skotwaldron.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I have some goods on my website. So just check those out. Free resources galore. Thank you again for being here, and I'll see you next time on another episode of Unlocked.